You are the only person on this planet that can be the dad to your kids. Everything else in your life, even the good things, somebody else can do, right? I'm the pastor at this church, and God has brought me to this place, and it's super important, but somebody else can do this job, and someday somebody else will do this job for whatever reason. But no one's ever going to be a father to my five kids. And so, man, if you don't take that responsibility seriously, the harm is going to just continue to go out.
Welcome to this episode of the American Christian Podcast. I'm Derek. He's Chris. This is going to be a first for us here. We're going to call this American Christian Conversations. We're sitting here with Seth Westmoreland, Pastor Seth Westmoreland. Seth, go ahead and introduce yourself, what it is you do, what you're passionate about, and a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, so I appreciate you guys having me. This is fun. It's always fun to be the first of new podcast. I like what you guys are doing. Yeah, my name is Seth. I'm the pastor of Bethany Bible Church. I've been here for 3 years. Made the move to Michigan in 2023. I was a pastor, an assistant pastor, or associate pastor in a town called Magnolia, Texas, for almost 12 years, and before that, I was a teacher and a coach. But before all of that, I was a husband to a wonderful woman named Rainey, and I have five incredible kids, ranging from 23 down to 11. And have my oldest is getting married in November, which is starting to make me feel a little older. Uh, which is, because that means you're knocking on the door of grandfatherhood, and come on, I'm not that old yet, right? So, yeah, I have a passion for leading people into a growing relationship with Jesus Christ, coming to know Jesus as Savior. I have, for 10 years, nearly 10 years, I was the kids pastor at Magnolia's First Baptist Church. And the beauty of being a kids pastor is you get to have a lot of fun, do a lot of crazy things, but also reach into the lives of families and parents, and really partner with them as they raise children, right? One of the great myths of Christians is that you take them to church, you let the kids ministry disciple them and show them the way, and then you just that's it. That's as far as it goes, and that's just not it, right? I have you for 2-3 hours a week, and you have them for the rest. So it's their responsibility. So my passion was to equip them to do what God has uniquely qualified them to do, which is to raise their children. And I, over the last 15 years, I have had the incredible pleasure to work with a man named Jeff Springer, who is the founder of an entity called Suit Up Ministries, which has a division called the Dad University, which is what we really lean into now. We have partnered with men all over the world to shape them into the understanding of the need for men to get off the bench and get in the game when it comes to being the dad that God has called them to be. And I look forward to talking with you guys about all things dad today.
Well, thanks, Seth. Yeah, I was actually a children's pastor myself for 7 years, so I kind
Yeah.
of
All
relate
right.
to where you're coming from there. And that was just one of the same things that I said was, I only got you guys for 1 to 2 hours a week, and I would frequently visit their homes because I worked in a church where we would bus kids in. So we
Mm-hmm.
rarely saw their parents. A lot of the kids, we rarely saw their parents. So I would make it a point every other week or so, weekly to every other week, go visit their parents and just try to let them know who I am and where my heart was with them. But yeah, it's a big responsibility to speak into the hearts of those young kids, and then also develop that relationship with their parents. But
Absolutely.
and sadly, a lot of the homes that I visited, you only ever talked to mom. You rarely saw dad if he was there, and even more sad, a lot of the homes dad wasn't around. So I could see that in their lives specifically. So I talk a little bit about the impacts that, you know, as a pastor, you've seen it, especially as a children's pastor, the impacts that you see in those kids' lives when you know that the father's not in.
Sure. I mean, as a teacher and a coach, I saw it firsthand. I mean, and I worked. So Dr. Jeff Springer was a principal for 30 years, and I had the privilege of being hired by him to teach. And we developed a relationship that way. And over his 30 years, what he'll tell you is, he saw so many kids growing up without a father. And I mean, this is not like he was in the inner city, right? We were in a very affluent suburban area of Houston, and yet fatherlessness was still prevalent. And it was such a tragedy that's what really pushed him to start Suit Up Ministries and the Dad University, because it's just the model hasn't been there, right? Like men have been in the home, right, in the past, in the greatest generation. The men were there, but they weren't there, right? The raising of kids was left to the mother, unless the dad had to come home and use the belt or something like that. But genuine, true being the daily active, devoted father or dad has been missing for quite some time. And now with divorce rates and single parenting and co-parenting, all that stuff, it's just not happening the way that it should.
Yeah, and I mean, growing up without kind of a dad in my life, I know some of the effects of those early childhood years of having a dad in the house. Luckily, later on, my mom, did meet my stepdad, and so going through some of those teenage years, I did have, a father figure in the home. But um, it really affects and kind of changes us, right? And it's really important to have the dads there. And um, I was looking at some of the statistics here, and a couple of the studies, and one of the things that I found out is that having, a dad there in the younger years, um, can help with problem solving competencies and independence, and like having, moms are awesome, right? And they're certainly important as well, but the dads kind of uh, allow for learning experiences that maybe they're a little bit more freeing, in a way, and they teach that independence. And so it's super important to have, fathers in the home. you know I mean, you've probably like seen this firsthand, when there's fathers and when there's not.
Yeah, I mean, and it's so much more too than, I mean, you've got there's so many angles of life, right? Your experience is one of them, but you've also got uh, a the feminization of our culture, unfortunately, that is really taking place because men aren't stepping up, because men are, they're focused on making a living, right? Even dads that are in the home, they're so focused on trying to make a living, especially in your formative years, right? 20 to 40, that's your real big growth as far as earning potential. And you get caught up in this whirlwind of trying to provide, which is what you're supposed to do, but you're missing this incredible opportunity to raise your children, which again, like I said a minute ago, right? You are the only person on this planet that can be the dad to your kids. Everything else in your life, even the good things, somebody else can do, right? I'm the pastor at this church, and God has brought me to this place, and it's super important, but somebody else can do this job, and someday somebody else will do this job, for whatever reason. But no one's ever going to be a father to my 5 kids, and so man, if you don't take that responsibility seriously, the harm is going to just continue to go out. And I mean, you see that in scripture all the time, where you have a dad that was not present, that was too busy with his own life. And man, I mean, even David, right? Look at David. His kids turned out terribly because he was busy doing other things, and he had lost his focus, lost his way, or even doing good things as a warrior. But he didn't step up and speak into the lives of his kids. And next thing you know, they're trying to usurp the throne. They're trying to, kill each other. I mean, there's a whole list of problems. And that's just one example within scripture. The dad is so important. and it can't be undersold how imperative it is for a man to take that responsibility, and it is not one that they should take lightly.
Yeah, and I was looking at some stuff too, and I've seen statistics in years past. Like one, I think right current most recent statistics I've seen is 1/3 of U.S. children live without a father in the home. That's insane.
That's
I
scary,
mean, that's
right?
an
That's
insane
scary. If
number to
that's
really think
true,
about.
that's insane.
They're more likely to show disciplinary issues. I think it's somewhere like 2/3 or to over 2/3 of high school dropouts are from fatherless homes. Similar statistic for teenage pregnancy. Um, they have more prone sexual abuse or riskier behaviors regarding like maybe pornography addiction and different things like that. So, as you said, it can't be overstated the importance of a father in the home. And um, but you mentioned one thing that I thought was really interesting. You said the feminization of our children or in our culture specifically, and that's something that I've seen a lot. Growing up myself, I can think back on like say television in the '90s where have all these. That's where like the family sitcom was born almost. A lot of shows like Home Improvement, Family Matters, and things like Roseanne. There's
All my
tons of
favorites. The Fresh Prince, man, watch that all the time. Uncle Phil.
and, everybody loves Raymond, all these different shows. And one thing that I noticed throughout a lot of these shows is the men were always portrayed as insensitive, detached, kind of like the moron figure, like this a blithering idiot, so to speak. And the wife was always being abused or not thought about. The children were always not fathered correctly. They could never really do anything right. I think the only exception, I think the greatest TV dad ever was John Connor. So in Roseanne, he was my favorite. But majority of the show showed that kind of feminization or like that feminist movement of um, kind of demoralizing the father in the home. So I don't. It seems like a growing trend as we're against the patriarchy, against masculinity. These kind of things that we're seeing in our culture is really hurting fatherhood. I think in this country, specifically in Christian homes, which is sad.
Yeah, so, I would probably I'd kick back a little bit. Like in the '80s and the early '90s, I think you saw dads that were very much present. Again, like I was saying, I was watching Fresh Prince, man. Uncle Phil filled in the gap for an absent father for Will's character, right? I mean, Family Matters. Think about Carl Winslow guy. He was always throwing out those important sit down nuggets and with his daughters or with his son. But what you saw as we continue to move on, right, in the early 2000s and the 2010s, that's when you started seeing more of the dad is not as necessary, right? And listen, my favorite comedian is Nate Bargatze. He is incredibly hilarious. He's a clean comedian, but his thing is that he has nothing to do with anything. And yet that's just a joke. People laugh at it, but it's because it's funny because it's true, right? There's threads of truth. Now, oddly enough, he is a great dad. He doesn't know anything about fixing stuff and doing all those things, but man, his daughter loves him because he is engaged with her and does everything possible with her. He may not know necessarily what school she goes to, but he definitely knows everything else about her, and they talk all the time. That's the thing that it's hilarious, right? Like we make fun of it because it's so uncomfortable that we laugh, and because if you don't, you'll cry. But there's so few people that are genuinely doing it well because it's hard.
Yeah, and I think, like you were saying, you know, we as dads, we do need to step up in and be involved in our children's lives. We should know, what's going on in their lives. And you were saying that, oftentimes we are pulled in so many different directions, but one thing to know is that your kids are never getting any younger, right? And every day that
Never.
you have is a day to pour into them, because there will be a day when they turn 18, or like your daughter who's 20 and getting married, right? There's going to be a day where they're going to go off, and we have to prepare them, right? And so being involved in their lives is super important. And it's just something that I feel like, if we let this go and we don't get involved, well, they're never going to build a relationship with us.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna miss out on something. You're gonna look back, you know, what if you have young kids, right, Chris? You have really young kids, Derek. I don't actually know if you have kids, but you look back very quickly and go, "Whoa, how did I miss that?" Right? I very distinctly remember my daughter, you know, a week old, swinging in a little tiny swing, and now I look at her and she's a grown woman planning this wedding, and you know, it's that feels like it was just yesterday, although it was 23 years ago. But, you know, as you get older, what you start realizing is, man, it just keeps moving faster. And so you have to be more intentional every day to make the most of the time that you have with them, because like you said, I mean, 18 comes pretty quick. I've got two out of the home already, and I've got one more that I'm working on getting him out of the home. He's pretty close. His school's getting close to being finished, and he's going to be out of there, and then I'll just have two left. And one of them is, you know, 16. She's out, actually outside while I'm doing this podcast. She's driving around in a car practicing, which is insane. And you know, it just goes by quickly.
Yeah, I have a 13 and an 8-year-old. I have 13 and
Right.
8-year-old son, and I
Yeah.
have a
Oh, okay.
22-year-old daughter. She
Giddy up.
is
You
actually
know.
adopted. When I met my wife, she had a 6-year-old daughter. So
Okay.
I think it was about 4 years after. I don't want to say the wrong date because then I'll get in trouble. But it was shortly after we got married. I ended up going through the adoption process and adopting my stepdaughter at the time. Now my daughter calls me dad. You know, we haven't, it's a normal father daughter relationship. There's never been really kind of a weirdness, I think, between us. That relationship's grown over time, which is awesome. That I haven't, but I was raised by a stepmom. My mom dated a guy for a long time who I looked up to as a stepdad at the time. So I was raised by step parents. I see the importance. I see, and what step parents do is great. I mean, I think of Mary and Joseph. Joseph was Jesus's stepdad, you know, so I think God has a special place in his heart for step parents. But at least that's the excuse I use.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, and
Um,
not only that, but grandparents, aunts, uncles. I mean, listen, spiritual parents, all of those people play an incredible role in the raising of kids and bringing them into. It's why it's so important to be a part of a church community. It's why it's so important to have other people speaking into your kids' lives, because you know those are valuable, but that doesn't replace your responsibility, and that's what has to be emphasized. And you know, it is why it's so tragic anytime you see a marriage fail, or because then you don't, you know that those kids, obviously they are the collateral damage in this whole thing. And but only not only that, but you know, divorces also don't happen overnight, right? Like there's a lead up, and there's problems, and those kids see that, and instead of seeing what it's supposed to look like, they're seeing the opposite. And man, it does incredible damage. I'm an adopted father. I've adopted three of the children that we have, and man, it is a constant re-educating of what the dad is and who he should be, and mom too, for that matter. What a loving family looks like to a couple of these kids, and it is a tough road to go.
And one thing that I think, both of you guys being adopted dads, right? I'm not, but kind of knowing that you're stepping into some of those roles, especially like stepdads. I know growing up, I probably didn't treat my stepdad with the same respect that I probably should have. But stepdads, like, they take on an amazing role, and it's it's almost one that, like, I think stepdads kind of feel like they can't a little bit because it's not their son or daughter. But stepdads, they play an amazing role in these formative years as well. And I think that, we need to recognize, step parents just as much as recognizing,
Sure.
biological fathers in a way.
Everyone needs to be equipped. Everyone needs to be prepared for what is coming. And yeah, you can't shirk that responsibility. It's very different, right? Like the thought processes are different, the way that you have to engage, the patience you even have to have. All of those things are different, but the importance of it all is right up there.
um, and So something that I'm interested in having you talk about is a little bit about what Dad University does and how they equip fathers. I guess I wouldn't say to be better dads. I don't know if that's the term you would use. I would say like equip them um, to grow in their fatherhood, right? And maybe is that more of the
Yeah,
language
I
that
mean,
we want
some
to look at?
people need to become better dads, right? We
That's
we
true too.
we have a yeah. I mean, listen, we deal with all types, right? Those that are engaged, those who are off the bench, those who are in the game, doing what they're supposed to. We help to take them that next step. But then also those dads that have never gotten off the bench, those who have just left it up to mom, we equip them. And then what we're learning currently in Africa is that man, they just do not know there was a there's an incredible culture shift of a dad who takes responsibility to raise the children, but not only that, to be a great husband, to be present. I mean, all of it is it's absolutely revolutionary, and we've seen it on mass scale of men who are coming back to the faith, coming back to their families, and just engaging. But yeah, the Dad University birthed out of a ministry called Suit Up Ministries. We have a website called thedaduniversity.com, and that'll take you to just a wealth of resources that we've been working on for the last 15 years to cultivate and to curate this incredible place where everyone can go. So we call Dr. Jeff Springer, who is our founder, he calls it a one-stop shop. There's so much there that would take so long to go through it all. So I can't possibly do that. But I would say, just from the homepage alone, you can see different resources that we have, different videos that we have. You can subscribe to our YouTube page. You can even sign up for free coaching, right? We give our first round of dad coaching away for free with Dr. Jeff Springer. He'll schedule you a 30-minute time where you can just sit and tell him your story, and he'll listen, and then we can work and cultivate the right thing for you depending on what your situation is. We have a lot of partners that we partner with that are other dad organizations, and then we push everybody to the Dad Prep book. Back in 2020, after attending a funeral, Dr. Jeff realized that legacy is so important, and things go by so quickly. So he went on a 52-week journey of writing this Dad Prep preparation for legacy book. Ultimately, it started as a blog that we posted and sent out to our men every week, but it turned into a book that we've published. We now have it available in English and in Spanish. And it has been an incredible resource for men to just walk through either by themselves, although we encourage them to go through it, on a weekly meeting where you can go through the different thing in about 10 to 15 minutes and then spend the rest of your time, just talking about the issues of today. We have what's called a locker room. The locker room houses just so much incredible resources, including a podcast series that we've done. We probably have 40 or 50 podcasts that we have sat down with different men and women who have experienced dadhood from different angles, right? Like when you go to our podcast, we have just a lot of different guys, some very nationally recognized speakers and authors, and then just men, pastors who have spoken to the lives of men. It is a wealth of resources and a really good quick hour to listen to and just to be inspired by some of the different things. And one of the things that we talk about is divorce dads. How do you be the dad in a situation of divorce? Right? Sometimes it just happens. It is just what happens in this world, and we can't ignore it. And so how does one be a dad in a situation of divorce? We have a couple men that talk about that through the podcast. We talk about just so many different angles of what these dads go through. But not only that, each podcast has a discussion page, right? So we like to encourage people to get into a huddle, get around a group of men, and go through these things, right? Watch the podcast and then come together for a meeting, cup of coffee, with a discussion page, and you can go through all of these different materials and curriculums, ask questions, going through the different topic of the podcast. I mean, it is an incredible resource that we love to point people to. And then another thing, like I said, we have the Dad Prep book, but with the Dad Prep book, we've created a significant amount of, we've got a companion workbook that's available for free. You can click on every link and it'll take you to all of the things that are going on there, but also there are videos that are happening that we have published through the YouTube page that'll help man walk through kind of what Dad Prep is all about and getting ready for legacy. Those are incredibly valuable resources that we love to point men to. And, it's still a work in progress. Everything is constantly evolving and changing. It seems like every week, a link gets broken or something like that. When you start working on websites, man, you know that it's just a never ending process. But we have just a great amount of things that are here available for free. Everything is for free, right? We have some incredible supporters. If you want to jump in and be a supporter of the Dad University, we would certainly welcome that. We have different campaigns that we love to point people to, but that is certainly not the expectation. We get about 300,000 to 400,000 hits on our website every year. And man, that warms our heart that men are receiving this information and utilizing this information. It is really something that we look forward to continuing to grow for as long as we can. Dr. Jeff, when he retired from being a principal, he actually never said that he retired. He said he repurposed, and in his repurposing, he focused strongly on the Dad University. We hosted some one-day and half-day events that were fantastic, all right before COVID. And then COVID hit, and that's when we shifted to more of an online meeting situation. But man, it has been great, and it's growing all the time.
Yeah, speaking of growing, do you mind telling us about like how it traveled all? Because now there's some places in Africa as well that I believe are
Yeah.
kind of incorporating this.
Yeah, so
How did
Dr. Jeff had a missionary came to his church, and they were just talking, and one thing led to another. They started talking about dads, and the missionary was talking about how there is such a need in this was Uganda at first. There was such a need for uh, education of men as to what it looks like to truly be a dad, right? There's a lot of fathering going on. There's a whole lot of men having babies, but there's not a lot of men that are being the daily, active, devoted dad that God has called him to be. And so Dr. Jeff and this man, they partnered together, and they had a big launch about 6 weeks after their first interaction. Once the man was able to get back to Uganda, and there were over 1,000 people at the first event, 1,000 men who heard the message of being a dad. And from that, it has just blossomed all over Uganda and into Kenya. And we're moving into other surrounding nations there in Africa. Men are driving 4 and 5 hours to get to these huddle locations where they can hear the message of Jesus, but also the message of what they're called to be in regards to being a dad. It was a completely unexpected thing, right? We were not moving in that direction. We were trying to build huddles in Southeast Houston, and that was going really slow. And then this thing just exploded, right? It has been an absolute joy to watch it grow, to watch it uh, just continue to go in different places. And you go to our website, and you can click over to the YouTube page and pull up any of the videos that we have. So many of them are now from these experiences and these huddles that are going on all over Africa. And I mean, we're launching different huddles in different places. There's an incredible story that we got about a year ago. A young guy found us online, right? And he was looking over the website. He was going through all this stuff, and he went to his local church and he said, "Hey, uh, we need to know more about this." And so they got in touch with Dr. Jeff, who got in touch with Pastor George Jode, who's over in that area. And then a huddle just exploded from that. And it was just because a guy found our website. And it's a beautiful story that, I mean, he's not even 20 years old. He's just a kid that was looking on his phone, going through all of the different resources, and recognized the need to be prepared to be a dad. And man, it has been so exciting.
there's so many things that you just said that are just sparked a whole lot of different paths that went down in my head. Uh, but it's awesome that the Dad University has material for all men of all walks of life. So you mentioned the divorce rate. So as a Christian organization, there's not this um, judgment or whatever other word you might want to use on divorce. It's, hey, this is a situation that you're in. This is the cards you've been dealt. Here's how we can help you be a better dad in the situation that you're in. And that's awesome that there's incorporation of understanding these different walks of life. No matter what happened, life happens, things happen that we are out of our control, and people need resources and help for those sorts of things. The men out there that are divorced that are going, now what do I do? There's a place for them to
Yeah.
go. And one of the things that I'm particularly interested in, because I've seen this as being on the pastoral staff in a church, and not all churches are like this, but just as my own personal experience, something that I observed is you see men who do come to church, but you're seeing maybe their fatherhood slipping a little bit, where they're now in a position where they don't know how to regain that Christian leadership in their home as the dad, the husband, and the father. They feel lost. What do I do now? Like I was on fire for God and I was leading my family, but now there's been this disconnect and they don't know how to get back to getting back on track of being that father and that husband in the home.
Yeah, I mean, you're that that happens to everybody, right? Like you jump into it with both feet and then life really hits, right? It moves from that super excitement period to the everyday period, and that's where the book of Ephesians is so powerful, where it really just reminds us what it looks like to be a husband first, to love our wives the way that they need to be loved, and man, you can't overemphasize that. It starts with a great marriage. It starts with loving the person that you have covenantly committed to. But then, if you found yourself faded away, you faded away from the responsibility. Maybe you didn't even notice it, right? Which is what really happens, right? Drift is a real thing. Most men do not intend to stop being the dad, but what happens is they are not intentional to every day make sure that they are still in line with what they should do. And so what ends up happening is they drift from that responsibility. And before they know it, they look around and they're a great lake away from where they should be. That's a Michigan reference that I'm learning. Sorry. Uh, I could have said the state of Texas, but I didn't. Um, and so you have to be very intentional to work your way back and understand that grace is sufficient, right? Grace from God, He forgives and He's ready to take you from where you are and start moving you forward, and to recognize that there might be resistance as well. Again, when the moms they take up the rink, great women are great at filling in the gap and doing what needs to be done, and then they sometimes will get resistance to when you try to get back, and so you have to be patient and you have to make sure that you are respecting the things that they have taken responsibility for, but then show them constantly side by side, walking with them, showing them that you are ready to be the intentional dad that you are called to be the intentional spiritual leader in your home. And then, man, stick with it. Be consistent. And the only way that you do that is by keeping yourself close to the Word, keeping yourself close to your in prayer to God, but also staying close to other men, right? Encouraging one another as iron sharpens iron. That's the thing that usually allows for drift. You have great intentions, but because you don't have anybody holding you up or being accountable to say, hey, man, what's going on? Where are you going? What is going on? You've spent a lot of time in the office this last week. Hey, you're traveling a whole lot right now. What's going on? And not taking excuses, but really, walking with them down the path. That goes a long way. I think men have a real problem with not having friends, right? If you've been in ministry for any amount of time, you recognize that men don't even realize it until they stop and look around and go, "Oh, I have a lot of dudes that I know, but I don't have any friends. I don't have any men that I actually invest in or that I allow to invest in me or to speak into me." And that's a tragedy, because that means that you're lonely. That means that you're trying to do it all by yourself. And that's not the way that we're designed. And that's the quickest way to fail, and to end up being far away from where you genuinely desire to be.
Yeah, sorry, Chris. Yeah, that's something that I've talked to my wife a lot about. I've mentioned to her a couple times, like men need men too, you know,
You have
and
to. It
and
looks
the
a little
sad
different than
thing
what
is,
women need.
yes, and the sad thing is I've been in that position where I've looked around and I'm like, I have no like I don't have any close personal friendships with any of the men. Like I know men that I go to church with. I know Chris. We we met through school. But as far as like that deep personal relationship, that accountability that you're talking about, almost like a discipleship relationship, that doesn't exist. And something that I found out, and sadly I think needs to be course corrected in a lot of churches, and some churches are really trying to get men engaged, is when I've reached out to men and you get this like, well, I'm busy. I don't have time for that. I have my own things going on. I do this. So the importance among the other men in our culture of saying, yes, this is important. We need to start getting together. Our pastor is intentional. We have a once a week like a men's breakfast. We get together. Even if it's through like church projects, we're working on, you know, doing something to the roof at the church or something like that, but we're all doing it together and we're all communicating. We went on a camping trip recently. So he's being very intentional, trying to get the men to do things together through that spiritual community there. But sadly, in my 20 now years of being a Christian, this is like one of the first intentional efforts I've seen within the church that I've been involved in, of a pastor trying to get men together to encourage one another in that regard.
Yeah. Yeah, we just launched that, just a few months ago here, and it is slow going at first because, again, men recognize that we know what we need to do, but we often don't recognize what is the most important, and so we just don't do it, and so there's resistance, and so, man, prayer has to be a huge part of that for God to change the hearts of just one man, to see the vision and the importance of men to come together, to be strengthened and to be built up and to disciple one another into an understanding of the scriptures, but also to be dads, to be fathers and husbands, all of those things, and yeah, again, it's one of those things that Satan doesn't often just throw a grenade right in the middle of things. He just slowly picks away things, and before you know it, it's the norm to just be doing all of this stuff on your own. And yeah, and then also the creating the resistance of men to say, "Ah, I really don't have the time," or they don't see the value in it. And man, that's where prayer is so important. You gotta pray that God changes their hearts. At least one man.
And you're 100% right. Like these communities are really, really important. And oftentimes churches have, stuff for, kids, teens, they have stuff for adults, but they don't recognize that, men and women operate differently. And so having a men's group that's dedicated for that is really important. Um, and I would argue, like, you know, when I was first becoming a dad, right? Finding some resources was kind of difficult. Like there's a lot of books on motherhood, there's not as many resources available for fathers and trying to fill that, but that's where the church comes in, and having a wise group of men beside you who have done this before, right? And then also like looking to scripture. Scripture is actually probably one of the best resources for a guidebook on fatherhood because of how our heavenly Father operates with us, and with patience and love. And we can see these things, these attributes of God, our Father, which we can impart upon our children.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a reason why he's called a good father, right? Like the more that you look at God as the father that you need to be, the more you will realize exactly what you need to be, right? And God operates in community as well, right? Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. So if you think you got it, you can do it alone. You're wrong right from the jump. But also just the understanding of grace, the understanding of what real love is, and sacrifice, and what it really means to be the leader, to be the head of something. It is not a demanding thing. It is not a thing that is easy, right? It is giving up. It is sacrificial. It is not demanding your own way. And and man, that's where again the world has told you and sold you a complete lie in regards to what that really looks like. Which is why, a lot of people, when I marry people and I bring up Ephesians 5, there's a significant resistance of, oh, the respect thing. Oh yeah, we got to submit to the husband. I'm like, oh no, that's not the way that is not a negative thing, right? As a wife, you should be looking for that, because if it's done well, that person is laying down their life for you. They are putting you above all things. And just like God has done, he sent his son to die for our greatest need and our sin. And and he didn't hesitate. And so the men who are leading the home must act in the exact same way, to sacrifice what we need to in order to lead our families. And man, that's good news. That should fire women up. That shouldn't cause them to cower back or to resist, because it is not a loss of power. It is an empowering of them to the truth of the way that God loves them, and wants to do whatever it takes to support them the way that they need to be supported and loved.
Yeah,
I,
and
I,
one thing that I think a lot of people kind of forget about in Ephesians is it shows, the husband and the wife and how they should operate. Again, that sacrificial love that the husband should have as well. But we've talked about how, like me and Derek have talked about, when you have two people who want to run the show, it's very difficult to go in. You're fighting. You can't have two captains driving the ship, right? And so that submission is not to degrade the woman in any way, but it's to help with operating the family as a whole, right? And again, like, when my wife, gives her opinion, I take that wholeheartedly, right? I understand where she's coming from, but at the end of the day, like, if both of us are trying to make a decision, it's going to be very difficult, right? But one of us, at the end of the day, should be kind of taking in all the information and making the best decision for our family. But going into marriage, I think that when we look at how marriages operate, especially like, you know, having kids, they look at that marriage and they see what a good marriage should look like. And I think that um, that's one of the things that's really important as well. Like, your marriage imparts upon your children what they should be looking for in a spouse, especially like a Christian spouse. Are they dedicated to God? All of these different things. And I think that, yeah, again, marriages play a really key role into children's spiritual growth from the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way it was designed, right? God did it on purpose. It's why you can't just spontaneously make a person. There, it takes two people, and if it takes two people to make them, it's going to take two people to raise them, and that's, I think, something that is forgotten. Right? It is not on just one or the other. We are designed for both to work together, to raise children, to be parents together, and to show them what it looks like to continue that on, right? That's the only way that this whole thing is going to keep moving forward.
I think that the one of the points that you just made is, a little while ago, is really important. Is that this? I think there is a misunderstanding of the biblical relationship of husband and wife, when it comes to within the home and parenting, because with men, we know we're supposed to be the leader of the home, but I think that, like you said, we kind of misunderstand that, put a lot of pressure on ourselves as to what that actually means as a leader. And biblically, I like to call it, we're a submitted leader. We submit to God's will and we lead according to how he wants us to lead our families. And I had a pastor one time tell me, I was actually at a men's retreat, um, and he was preaching a message. He made a great point. He said, do you realize that it's not your job to provide anything? God provides everything you need. You're just a steward of what he provides. And that should give you relief to know, all I have to do is make sure I'm being wise with what God's providing. I don't have to work so hard to provide anything, because God's going to provide it. So I just need to do the simple tasks of work, provide the home, provide, safety and security, and, the other things that we have to provide as men, or, do as men. God's going to make these other provisions for us. We're going to see God putting these things in our path, and we have to look at it and go, okay, how do I wisely steward what he's providing me. And when we submit to God that way, there's a submission on the father and the husband and the father's part to God, which is going to trickle down really into the submission of the wife. And then you have a better dynamic within the kids because everybody's submitting to what really matters, which is God's will and God's provision and God's grace and God's love. And if we're trying to do everything ourselves, it comes off as very stressful, um, could be dictatorial at times. And that's not the way that Christian men should be leading their homes and fathering their children and being a husband to their wife. So I think there's definitely, like, and I think it's a cultural thing. We try to attribute what culture tells us as a leader versus what God says kind of leader we're supposed to be. We have to separate the two. They are mutually exclusive. There are some good leadership qualities we can incorporate, but as far as biblical leadership is concerned, I think the Bible teaches a lot differently as to what that means for men than what the culture is going to tell us.
Yeah, it's why we're so passionate at the Dad University to really focus in on men because it's going to start there. It's going to start with men recognizing the God-given role that they have, uh, and it's going to take strength to bring it back. And it's not a fast thing. It's not an instant thing. It takes time, right? It took a long time for us to get to this point. It's going to take us time to get back, but we have to be intentional in order to get back to where we need to be. And it's got to start with us, right? Because we can't keep kicking the ball down to the next generation and say, well, maybe they'll get it right, because that's clearly not working. Uh, Men today need to step up, and there's no better time than right now to step up and to take the responsibility that we've been given, and do the hard work that maybe wasn't modeled for you. Model it for your next generation. Model it for your grandkids. Right? And we deal with so many older men who are going, my kids are 40 years old, and I don't know what to do, and they won't listen to me. And you're like, well, what about your grandkids, man? Take the opportunity to teach them the truth, because that is your responsibility. Well, you're a grandfather. You need to get in there and be the granddad that is so important, and such an important responsibility. It's not just fun and spoiling them, although that's a great part of being a grandpa. It is also, teaching them along the way, because they listen to you, they're watching you, they want to know how to be like you. And that's the other thing that we always forget, and that's why we allow ourselves to make these terrible decisions. We forget how many eyes are on us, right? They're all the time. These kids are watching the things that we do. I mean, I think of all the times that my kids have said something to me, and they're like, well, I just was doing what you were doing. And you're like, whoa, hold on. I didn't ever say that. Like, "Well, yeah, but you did it." And you're like, oh, I'm really sorry. I have to fix that. I can't believe that I allowed myself to do that without even recognizing it as well. And it's so important for us to model the behavior that that it's also coming out of our mouths, right? Like, we can't just give them lip service, because they read through that like a book, right? If you were a kids pastor, you recognize that really, really well. That those kids, even at a young age, they'll hear what you say and they'll listen to you, but they want to see it in you first. And man, that's what we have to do. And so there's no better time than to start with us right now, to be the dad, to use the resources that are available. And again, in 2026, there is no shortage of resources, definitely for moms, but even for dads. There's a ton of resources out there, if we're willing to put in the time, put in the effort, find another buddy, find another couple guys, and say, hey, let's sit down for coffee, and let's go through this and just talk about some of these things that are going on, because I'm struggling, and I need somebody to walk with me.
And I would say for all three of us coming from a background of children's and family ministry, right? We can say that the most important thing at the end of the day is for our children to be brought up, in um, the church, right? I think that again, specifically, not growing up in the church, there's a lot of things that I had to catch up on later on and learn about that, because I didn't grow up in the church. But these formational years are some of the most important to pour into, and to build those foundations. And I think that again, that also comes from your, us fathers showing how important church is, and diving into scripture, and doing some of these things at home. I mean, Deuteronomy 6 talks about how, we're supposed to, teach our children as we sit down and eat, and as we go along the way, and as we go to bed and wake up. Like, this is something that is not just, so, it's supposed to be everything that we do, right? It's supposed to be, um, something that we ingrain upon our children. And I think and at the end of the day, right, the most important thing that we can teach them is the importance of a relationship with God. And so I think that, from a Christian father perspective, we need to make sure that we are placing an importance on, all of these things, and we're having a relationship with God.
Exactly. I mean, that is exactly what uh, we got to do. And you think about the stories in the church, right? There's so many people in the church that that I can think of that spoke into my life, right? I had two parents in the home. I was raised in a great family, and yet there were still men in the church that spoke into my life that if I hadn't been there, I would have never gotten those experiences. And I talk to people all the time here at this church that talk about, with just incredible longing, the the beauty of the friendships and mentorships that they had with different men, some who never even had kids of their own, who took them under their wing. I mean, it's such an important thing for us to be involved in community. If you're trying to do this on your own, you're going to fail because the world is against you and you're not strong enough. But you have to be part of a community in some form.
Yeah, you mentioned the next, leaving it up to the next generation, and this this is something that I think like men like us need to recognize, that in the churches we have to be reaching these young people, because many of the men in their lives that could be examples for them aren't there, or aren't really healthy examples, at least for the, if you have young men in your church. And I know it's something like 44% of Gen Z men have no relationship experience whatsoever. They don't want to date. That I think for the baby boomer generation, it was like 88% in the same age group. So it's cut in half. And there's a lot of variables as to why these men don't want to, or opting out of the dating pool. I mean, we've already talked about the feminization of our culture. I think that there's also a rise, and or I don't want to say a rise in, but there's a recognition in what you would call domestic abuse of men. There's stats that 1 in 5 men are domestically abused in some way. It's verbal or physical or mental of some sort, where the spouse is not respectful, talks down to their husband. We noticed a little, you know, playful hitting or a smack in the face or something like that. Like, if you said something to your wife and you weren't thinking, and it was a little rude, we would see it all the time where the woman would smack the husband. Well, it's like that's that's an abusive situation that men don't need to be in. And I think that these young men are wanting to opt out because the culture is shifting, where I know I saw research, and I'm going to mess up the numbers for the women, but the number one life goal of, I think, Gen Z men right now was to get married and have a family. That goal for the same age group in women was like number 12 or number 11 or something like that. There's a disconnect of what life goals are. We have boss babes. Women are being told not to start having children until they're in their 30s. No, don't start a family until you're later in life. You enjoy your 20s. These different things. We have a cultural problem, and because of this, there's a there's going to be a diminishment of what young men stepping into these roles to be able to father their children the way God wants them to, and to be a husband to their wife the way God wants them to. And it's something that we definitely have to address and fix. And I think Dad U's going to be, the Dad University is providing a lot of resources that can help with that kind of stuff, either for these young men or for men to really give to these young men to say, here, this is where the path you need to be going down. So um, you're right. We can't leave it to the next generation, because it's just not there. And we really need some training and discipling of these young men.
one of the greatest things that we need to do with men, right? If you're watching this or you're thinking about this kind of a thing, one of the greatest things you can do is to find a young person and to just take them under your wing. And they're going to be resistant. They're going to be terrible at communicating. They're going to think that you don't understand anything, but stick with them, right? And don't feel like they're pushing you away. One of the biggest problems that we have in young people today is that they don't know how to communicate at all. And one of the greatest outcomes of 2020 is that we went from being a relatively isolated to society to being an incredibly isolated society. And these kids, like, well, I've got a son that's 21 years old. He spent most of his last high school years behind a computer screen doing Zoom classes, and now in college, that's all you're doing. And that's not a way to develop relationships, right? That's not a way to gain the skills to communicate with the opposite sex or with anybody at all. And so you have these incredible deficiencies that they're not being brought up and brought along, and it's a tragedy. And we have to be willing to dive into that incredibly hard situation and not say, well, they don't want to do this. I invited them to this and they said no, and so I don't know what else to do. Like, man, go to them, be be near them, invest in them. Don't let a couple brush offs detract you. Get in there and be what they need to be. Teach them and you gotta do it the right way, right? Like, you can't come in and be like, I know everything and you need to do it this way because you guys are the worst. Because that no, who likes that? No, you need to show them how much you value them. Listen to them and watch how quickly they start talking. I mean, it the online world that they live in is is not a real world. I mean, it is for them, but it is not one that has much of a future, right? Because again, there's no way to continue to procreate that way. There's no way to continue to move the species forward if it's all in a digital reality. So, uh, I think that the men need to be willing to the men who have a little bit of experience and a little bit of age and didn't grow up in the digital age. They need to bring those kids back because, again, one of the things that we're finding is these young people are tired of digital because they're recognizing the deficiencies that they have. And so we need to show them what it looks like to swing an axe, to drill a screw into the wall, or do some of these things, because they don't know how to do these things because all of that can't be done digitally. And we've got to make sure that we give them those experiences that they can't get online.
So let me ask you this: what advice, would you give pastors who are trying to set up something like this, like a men's and women's group, maybe for fathers and mothers, husbands and wives, right? To have these social groups, um, because like you were saying, with men, it doesn't come in our nature, right? And so I'm sure that the first time that you do one of these events, right, that it might be not as received as we might hope. What advice might you be able to give other pastors who are trying to pour into their community to help fathers out?
Be persistent. It is not, yeah, it's not natural for men to do that, but it's also not natural for us to eat healthy, and it's not natural for us to work out. It's not natural for us to treat people well because we're naturally a selfish and sinful people. So you have to be persistent and you have to be willing to push through what is natural and walk into this new paradigm. I mean, you can't get discouraged, right? One of the things that any any ministry leader will tell you is that when you start something new, when you try something new, there's always going to be resistance. There's going to be every reason in the world why we can't do it or why we don't have time to do it. But you have to. That's part of giving the vision of what is the most important, and it might mean shutting down some things that people like in order to focus efforts onto the things that they need. and again, you have to do that the right way, right? As a ministry leader, you can't just go shutting down everybody's favorite thing because you'll get a lot of kickback on that. But you have to slowly help them to see the importance of what is being missed from a church standpoint, but for also just for raising of men, raising of women, raising of kids, all of those things. It takes good leadership, wise leadership and strong leadership to stand and to say this is important and we're going to stand on it. And it's gonna probably go slow, right? The best things that happen organically, and it takes people getting on board, and so you just have to not get frustrated or down when it blows up in your face at first, or when it seems to be a terrible launch. You have to keep pushing through and keep continuing to emphasize how important this is and show them that, right? As a ministry leader, you have to be doing it as well. You can't just be standing up on a podium saying, this is what we have to do, and then let somebody else do it. You have to be right in the middle of that battle.
You mentioned the digital culture that our kids are growing up in, and I think one of the biggest challenges dads face, parents face in general, and I know I'm guilty of this too, is managing screen time on your kids. There's I've learned that there's a lot of resources out there. So one of the things I'll just give as an example personally is my son's 13. We're gonna start going to the gym, being active. There's research that shows the mental and health benefits, specifically among men, just from doing something physical. So people are like, why doesn't therapy work on men? Because men don't typically sit down and have discussions about what's going on internally. We work it out through physical force. I mentioned to Chris last week, I said, one of the things that boys don't like to do is be sedentary for 6 hours. That's why a lot of boys in public school are diagnosed with ADHD and all these other behavioral issues. But what boys really want to do is storm the castle, slay the dragon, and save the girl. They want to do something physical and purposeful with what they're doing and be active. So that's something that I'm going to get them out of the house and going to the gym. Just something small you can do a few days a week. I take them camping when I have the opportunity. There's organizations out there like Trail Life USA. They they're, they focus on Christ-centered living for young men, and they want the dads and the men to lead the group. So they allow female leadership, but more behind the scenes. So they want the main leadership to be the men. So they encourage male leadership among these young boys, and they go out and do outdoor things. They, go camping, they go hiking through the woods. There's some groups they go on like whitewater rafting trips and stuff like that in different parts of the country. So for the men that are out there, there are resources that are out there to get your kids off of that digital world, off of that, second life that they're living that, as you said, Seth, is not a personal life. It's very digital, it's impersonal, it's disconnected. And for dads to be able to just take your kids out of the home, out into the world, and let them experience that with you, is something that I've learned is important. And it is a struggle. If you have a kid addicted to their screen, to take them off that, they are going to fight you tooth and nail. It's going to be really difficult, but
Sure.
it'll
I
take
mean,
some time. But over
think about
time, you'll
us.
see the benefit. Yeah.
Think about us, right? It's hard for us to get away from our phones too, right? I've had 50 text messages just since we've been talking for the last hour. It's a critical part of our world now. But I think in relation to what you were just talking about, like what you're talking about is great as the formative years and kind of getting them out there and showing them responsibilities. But I think the other tragedy that's really happening in our world today is the failure for kids to launch, right? We have a lot of adult children that are living at home. We have a lot of adult children that don't have responsibilities. They've never had a job. They've never really had to talk to people. They've never had to go do an interview. And if they have, their parents have been right there. That's another huge thing that has to be remedied, is the willingness to launch kids, right? I think about when I was a kid, man, and this wasn't that long ago. I couldn't wait to get out of the house because it was the opportunity to be an adult. And it seems like now that's not the emphasis. The emphasis is like, "Oh, the economy's bad and just stay here and do this and don't, you gotta wait until you're never going to be financially ready." Right? It's just like what they used to say about getting married or having kids. They used to say, "Look, there's never going to be a time when you're financially ready or you're so ready to completely ready to get married, and you're definitely never ready to have kids because good gosh, that changes everything in your life." But you do it and you figure it out. And I think what the world being connected and all of the dangers and all the things that have always been but are now right in front of us, they've scared us into this to keeping everybody huddled together and not allowing them to launch and to really be who they are and to make mistakes like we were all allowed to do. It's like we've forgotten that we made a lot of mistakes and we're trying to protect our kids from doing it. At some point, you're not protecting them. You're harming them because launch is just as important part of parenting as being there with them, preparing them to get out into the world and to be the person that God has genuinely created them to be is so important. And you can't do that if you're keeping them close by and protected from everything.
Yeah, I mean, with me, I got married at 19 and first son at 21, and people's minds were blown away that I was, married and had kids so young. But look at me now, you know what I mean? I have an 8-year-old and been married for 10 years. And I think that sometimes, people are nervous about these things, but it's really like, you're never, like you said, you're never going to be ready. But that being
But you got
said,
to take the jump.
uh, yeah, it's one of the best decisions that I've made, right? And but so it's something that some people get nervous about, but you just gotta do it, right?
Our parents were nervous
Um,
too. We were nervous, but you still did it because you recognized how important it was. The nervousness, I mean, listen, scripture teaches us, do not worry, right? God, he loves us just as much today as he did when we were launching, 30, 40 years ago. He is the same God and he wants great things for us. And we can't be so afraid of what might be that we don't move.
Yeah. So, thank you, Seth, for coming. And I used to couldn't wait to get outside when I was a kid either. But the last few days, I can't wait to just stay inside. If you live in Michigan, you know why. We have the most hazardous air in the world right now. So, let's hope the wind shift and send all that smoke back to Canada. They get it under control. All joking aside, I hope they get under control and, the people that are close to it are staying safe and stuff like that. So, um, Seth, thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about all things dad. I know we did talk about all things dad. We could do this for probably a few more
Yeah.
hours, but
Yeah.
let everybody know again the website where people can get resources and can get equipped for fatherhood.
Yeah, so thedaduniversity.com is the best place to go for all of the resources. From there, we have links all over the place to our YouTube page, to our Facebook page. You can jump into the groups there and start conversations and meet people from your area all over the country and the world, wherever you might watch this. And I would highly encourage you to take Dr. Jeff up on his free coaching opportunity. Just click on that link and schedule a time to meet with him and he will get you on the path to dadhood. Thanks so much for having me, guys. I really appreciate it.
No problem. We thank you. Again, Chris at Pastor Chris USA on YouTube. Follow us on Rumble and YouTube at American Christian Podcast, as well as Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Seth, thank you so much for coming. Chris, you got anything you want to add?
no, like you said, we didn't do all things dad. We'll have to get Seth back at some point in time and just continue the conversation because I think for all three of us, it's something that is really, really important to us, and something that I think that we all, obviously have a responsibility in, but also helping fathers really get involved in the home is one of the best things that we can do. So I think it's something we definitely have to have Seth back on at a later time.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Seth. And we'll
Yeah.
see you next
Thank
time.
you.